Welcome everyone to today's topics webinar. This free 30-minute presentation that we've been offering important industry information with our members. I'm Jeremy Yowie, ALTA's, and today we will be implementing a plan to protect non-public personal, and this is one of the pillars of ALTA's Title Insurance and Settlement Company Best Practices that ALTA released in January. Joining me today is Todd Hougaard for GreenFolders, which provides an array of business solutions for title companies. Todd directs GreenFolders' marketing, sales, and sales development efforts, and he's also a member of ALTA's Technology Committee, which is in the process of developing a that will provide members additional compliance guidance to this pillar of the best practice. Also, Michael Volin of Title Resource Group. Michael serves as the company and Deputy Ethics and Compliance Officer. Todd and Michael, thanks for joining us today.
My name is Michael Volin, and we were just introduced. I'd like to welcome everyone to, obviously, everyone is on this because they understand the importance of non-public information. Of federal and state laws that require title company clients, lenders especially, to protect non-public information that we receive from our clients, and those restrictions from the laws themselves or trickling down through our lender client. We need to protect, for some of the obvious reasons, some of the reasons why I'm sure everyone is on the line, and that is basically if we don't protect it, it can have severe consequences to our businesses. It can trust with customers, which means we will lose clients. We will clients. If the breaches are significant enough, identity theft or even limited identity consumers who are coming after us for their losses, their loss of reputation, or any financial losses that may have occurred. If the breaches are be negative publicity, as every couple months we always see some large company that has a laptop or a lost U.S. has gotten into the public sphere, and that is never good to have your name in the paper for that reason. Something that Todd's going to go over right now.
All right. Well, thank you again to all of you that have that are attending today. Appreciate you taking the time to get a little more informed on this issue. What an exciting time to be in business. So a little bit about simply what is non-public personal information. Than some people think that it is. So we're going to read public information as NPI, just to keep the shorthand. So in base information that an individual gives to you to get a financial product or a service. So that could be any information that your organization gets in connection with providing your financial product or service. So that's more from the FTC technical side, how they very broad. Anything you get or they give to you in order to provide your service, if it's non-public, it's considered NPI. So it's information that's not available to the general public. I just actually yesterday read about a case where simply the fact that a relationship existed in providing the service was client information. So if you're in the settlement business, your customers are, and you're actively gathering information to provide your services, and in order to provide the service, you require information that's not generally. So you should keep that in mind, that NPI is not just a short list of information where we can say, here's a checklist of what might qualify. A couple of examples: a single document, information that by itself doesn't necessarily contain NPI, but if you combined it with other documents in your file, information is not public. So NPI can be more than just social social security numbers, for example. And I've got a couple of other examples for you to think about. One of your files, what do you find? So you've got banking information, you may have asset information, you may have records on people's retirement. Certainly their savings account is a common item, credit cards, loans, commission amounts to other people, and then of course licenses. If you look in your file, you're going to find information that's just not available to, and all of that non-public information your customer is entrusting to you to protect. Because if they want it to be public, they could be putting it out there, but they're not. So it's simply non-public information. If you want to jump to the next slide.
Information starts with making sure that the employees we hire who have access are people who we can trust. And that starts with doing background checks and doing credit reports at the time of hiring. It's a garbage in, garbage in, where if we don't protect the information by having quality people being hired, then it will create problems down the road. Another general, the information is, keep in mind how information door. And the first and easiest way is with removable media, USB drives, or if we have CD writers, a lot of laptops have today and a lot of computers have items that we should think about and discuss.
Yeah, so let me just add on to that. The physical security also applies to when you're delivering information that might be non-public. At the most recent technology committee meeting, as we were discussing this particular point, we have physical security is more than just your electronic information. It's all of the the other things that you deal with. So here are some questions for you to be thinking about. Do you use couriers, and who are they? And could a courier actually access non-public information? About mobile closers or mobile notaries, storage providers when they pick up your files. Some electronic formats we're going to talk about in a moment on another slide, but you should consider who your electronic delivery providers are, such as some email services specifically say in their policies that they do read your emails and they do extract information from those. So at a minimum, you should have your own domain for your email. How about your backup tapes or backup hard drives? Do you have a curl-up? As Michael Munch mentioned, how about a USB device that's in your pocket? So anytime information, you need to ask yourself if it is physically well guarded against unintended disclosure, regardless of if that information is in physical forms or if it's in electronic formats.
Now, simply knowing that we have to do background checks is not enough. Set up some policies and put those in place to make sure that when you're doing background checks, you're getting a quality check and you are complying with the laws and everything you need to do. So the first thing you need to do is, when you're onboarding someone and you're hiring someone, you get them to consent to checks it is you want to do, and can make sure that if you're operating in multi-state law, require and allow for doing background checks. Late have tried to restrict some of the more creative ways companies have been investigate their potential employees. One of those is trying to get Facebook. Been a lot in the media about that, and some attempting to prevent companies from getting Facebook passwords or other things. So you need to know what. Now, the good part of our industry is dealing with, because obligation to most of our consumers, because we're dealing with financial, as an industry, exempted from the restrictions on background. really do the most expansive checks of any company out there. What checks you want to do will determine how you do them. There are do on your own if you have access to certain databases which you can pay for. There's also outside company services. There are a variety of them, and what you get will depend, what you want to get will where you will need, might want to use. And finally, you need to figure out what it is you're going to do once you get the information. This is important because if you don't have a then for onboarding and what is going to be a disqualifying feature, then you put to a discrimination lawsuit if employee prospect A has a very low credit score, but you end up hiring them, and employee has the same low credit score and you don't hire them because of that, you're opening yourselves up to a disparaging treatment claim. So you need to figure out before you implement what I call tolerance for risk. What are the concerns that I have? What are the items that are going to prevent me from hiring someone? What are the items that are just going to require management to be involved in the hiring process?
All right, so another part of the pillar of protecting NPI to implement the best practice, one of the first things that you need to do is to identify, you keep your non-public information. So if you're going to draft policies, you certainly need to know where the information is. So for today's presentation, I pulled this graphic off of Wikipedia to just take a real basic approach. So a useful way to approach the problem is, I don't know if it's a problem, but your inventory. Divide your data into 3 categories. So this is data that's in use, someone is actively processing with it, data that's at rest, meaning it's inactive, and then data that's in motion, meaning location to another. And while these are generally applied to electronic formats, the same categories can apply to your paper files by substituting the word paper for data. So paper in use and paper in motion. And because NPI can be both paper and electronic formats, you should consider both those forms in your inventory. So simply knowing where NPI exists and understanding what you have responsibility for to coming up with your policy and to your practices. Jeremy, if you want to go to the next slide there. Just a moment about your network security. And there's a longer list of things a longer list of items to be considering about your network and the way your business is set up than we really have time to detail out today. We are working on the technology committee to give you some more detail about that, but I'm going to at least give you a few things for you to be considering, so that as you're trying to get a handle on that, you know at least some of the issues you ought to be thinking about. So you have policies for who can get access to your computers and your network, and you need to provide regular. But there are a few other areas to consider with your network. We live in a world that the networks are continuing to grow and to change, and they just are continuing to proliferate. That even a few years ago, we wouldn't be talking iPads and tablet computers and smartphones, all of which you want to have access to your network, but that you need to be thinking about. The other thing to think about is if you've got a wireless network in your office, that you've got it locked down so that just anybody coming in can't jump onto your network. So a few other items, a list of these off to just get you thinking about your network and some things that you might be doing to protect that network access. So here's a simple one with a timeout trigger. So if the computer's idle for a period of time, it automatically is on the computer. How about if you have a policy that says, hey, if you're not at your desk, you need to have your screen locked. Passwords. Mike's point earlier about passwords on password attacks continue to proliferate, and the bad guys are continuing to try and exploit that wherever they can. So you need to have strong passwords, and they need to be for individuals want group passwords or one for an entire office. Each strong passwords for anything that requires a passwords on a regular basis. Another thing to be considering is how does your network procedures change when you change an employee or a change in job functions. One of the things you should always what happens if we fire this person? Question. So what happens to network access? Can you restrict them or remove them quickly? Another consideration, who can install software on their personal computer? So you need to control what goes onto the computers that are accessing your network. How about your mobile device? And what NPI could the employees have stored on a mobile device? And then what if that person leaves or is terminated? Can you wipe out the company information that might be on their smartphone? What if it's their smartphone? Do you have the ability to erase it from that? Or phone. So a few items to consider for that. Another one, users to access your network, and if so, what tools do they use and are they secure? So if you're doing, maybe some kind of a terminal emulation VPN connections, are they encrypted VPN connections? Those are all issues that saying, do we have protections around our customers? Another simple one, who's in charge of data with patches from your vendors, and how often is that being done? Do they handle both operating system, also handle virus and malware protection updates? So a significant amount of the information that's flowing in and out of your network contains NPI. So as a security minimum, you need to make sure that you're transmitting only over encrypted connections, that the actual information is encrypted. So your network, you may need to provide a secure method, such as make sure so if you're taking customer information into your systems, lock down in a way that that it's secure.
Okay, move on. You were talking about passwords. Could you maybe explain that a little bit more, or Michael, one of you? What does that mean? Should I be using my daughter's name or, of course, my social security number for passwords?
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. This is one of those areas that the industry, thankfully, the computing industry, a strong password. We mean that it needs to have lowercase letter. As a general rule, you don't want to lead with a number on a password, because if the people trying to crack your password, and they can figure out that it's number, there's only on the keyboard the first digit. You've only got 10 options. As opposed to if you're using a character, you have 26 options plus you can capitalize it. Something that's alphanumeric as opposed to a number, or you've got special symbols that you can use. You also don't want to have it be something, to your point, a common word that would be found in a dictionary. Words that can be strong and would only be known by you, so someone else wouldn't be able to figure out what that happens to be. So yes, thanks for that point. They need to be something that's very difficult.
And Todd has laid out some great ideas. Ask yourself about the electronic security you need to take with physical security. One way to think about it, for those of us who are old enough to remember the old Master Lock commercials from where the only thing they had was a picture of the lock and somebody shooting the lock with a gun, and the lock still staying secure. About on your physical security, is this something that is secure when I walk away? So a lot of these are things that may or may not apply to you depending upon how large your agency is, whether you have a single office or multiple agencies. If it's not something that's consistent with your setup, then fine. But these are some general ideas to keep in mind for at your site. For example, it's a simple thing to add locks to file cabinets to you are done with files that they are secured. And this is important because custodial staffs who can come into our buildings who might be able to access it. If you're in a small facility where you have essentially shared offices, where your offices are at one end of the hall and there's another suite of offices at the other end, and sometimes you share a conference room. There can be concerns about people getting from one office to the other, and if they're open file cabinets, they can easily get in them. So you open secured file cabinets. If you're storing items off-site, you want to make sure that it's a warehouse, and that's not simply that it is locked, but that you limit who within your organization has access to it. And if there is ever a change of personnel in your organization, you can still maintain security. So if you have combination locks, it's combinations that can be changed if you lose employees. If there are physical locks with keys, it's something where you can get different keys if you are concerned about it. Some way that you can ensure the integrity. Custodian is important because there are always times where we need to get, there are sometimes times where we need to get old documents, either the file or if there was a lawsuit by property owners and they're asking for our documents. If we have a single person or a single set of people who are responsible for maintaining that, we will know that who can get that information. So do I want to be able to have access once a file is closed? Someone that can be trusted. If that person, there's turnover, is that something that I can pass along to someone else without a worry that there's going to be a loss in integrity of the protection of the files? And then something as simple as lock, if we're working at desk, somewhere where we can lock information if we're going to be away from our desks for a while. Todd mentioned having automatic after a little while, and that's something that you want to get all your employees in the habit of. If they're walking away from their desk, even for a little bit of time, they can just lock the computer. Nobody else can log on to their system. As to the electronic issues, Todd can jump into that one.
Yeah, and I would just add all of those things that Michael just described also would apply to your electronic system. So, you've got like a CD jukebox, or maybe you've got just a large storage device where you've kept your archive records. You need to make sure those are put into place that you have control over. So you don't want to just stick it into and get into it, or you don't want to put it in like an owner's garage. You need to be putting these in places that you have controls over. Point of your servers, you need to ask yourself, where did NPI go while it was being processed? Keep in mind that your emails, your instant messaging servers, your place that you have file storage, you need to make sure that you're thinking about where could information sit when it's not active, because you need to be responsible for making sure you're protecting access no matter what. On the NPI that's in use. So when you have actively in use, you also need to have some policies and protections in place. And oftentimes this will be training, other physical things you need to at least be considering. So, each office is a little bit different, but let me give you consider. So what documents do you have visible at a closing? For example, do you have both buyer and seller documents there? What if you stepped out to get a copy of a document? Could someone use their smartphone and say, take a picture of the buyer's loan application? So technology, and it's not just physically locking it up, it's what is the way we just handle this with a customer? How about if a customer calls and requests a copy of their settlement statement so how do your staff provide that to the customer? Do they paper copy? Do they send it via encrypted email? And do the staff know what they should do if they get a request like that? I work with a co-worker that was talking with a customer that had made a request for their settlement statement via plain email. It was also the wrong statement. So you need to be thinking about training and what protections you're going to have with your own people. Another one, when information's in use, if you have a website of your own, do you have controls in place to prevent the site from being hijacked? And if it did get hijacked, how would you know that? Another suggestion was actively processing an order to customers. So in a lobby, that if the receptionist happened to get up and leave, someone would be able to access information that's either sitting on a file on a computer. So as you think about how your processes are in place today, take a look at it and say where this, and take a look at it and have policy.
Now the next
Okay,
thing, sorry, go.
Okay, so let me just touch on your NPI that's in motion, and this is one where you're going to have to look is that you move information within your office, but you also need to look. This is also going to be an area where there's an opportunity to go and engage with your customers, because you think about vendors, you've got loan servicers, you get real estate agents, government entities, different service providers that each also have different requirements, and they might have your compliance or usability considerations of their own, practices in place of their own. So, for example, maybe they're emailing copies of the settlement statement. That's an opportunity to go connect with your customers and talk with them and engage with them to make sure the policy and procedures that will work for both you and for them.
Now, if we've done a great job, which we hopefully do, on protecting information as we're using it, we need to make sure we're just not throwing it in the trash bin. And the easiest way you can rem shredders available. Either have shredding bins if you're a larger operation that's going to require a lot to be, or just have shredders at various workstations. And make sure at the end of the day that it's somebody's job to go through the office and see, did anyone leave any non-public information on the photocopy machine that they forgot to pick up, or are there any sitting around general areas, and have that shredded.
And let me add that you may have information sitting on devices you may not. Example, most multifunction copy machines today have a hard drive in. So anything that's being copied or stored on the hard drive inside of the copy machine. So when that machine wears out, just like you can't go throw paper documents out in the dumpster, you can't throw the copy machine when it's worn out into the dumpster. And then any other hard drives coming out of computers. One of the things you should do is talk to your technical guys to clean those hard drives. There are other people that have said, you know what, we just destroy the hard drives. We don't even send those out. So those are other places that you need to be considering about equipment, is that there could be NPI on it that you need to protect.
And on this next slide, additional steps, these are just the things to think about once you've got all ideas into place. Here on the East Coast, we were struck with Superstorm Sandy, and a lot of us had to go to remote facilities to work. You need to make sure that what the plan is, it has in mind that you're going to protect non-public, and some of the things Todd talked about of secure servers. And if you're going to use a remote location where you're not normally working, you got to make sure it's physically and electronically secure. The next item is management and training of employees, and on the next slide we'll go through some of the things you want to. This is a top-down concern. If you set the tone as protecting NPI and as important as some of the other aspects of our, and you perpetually these, that will be something they take seriously. If it's just a once a year comes up on training that you may do every year or every other year, or it's just something you talk these, they're going to see that it's not going to take anything you say about it, or most of the things you say about it, seriously. And then finally, dealing with, you need to make sure if you're using outside vendors that they have good policies in place, information, so that when it leaves your offices and goes to someone you are using for support, it's not unprotected.
Yeah, I would just add to that point about your providers. Make a list of all of your providers, and it's free. And who are the providers you use? Because it may be something as simple as an email service provider or a network provider of some. Just need to keep in mind that just telling the settlement agents, hey, you're responsible as want to rationale to your providers and say, are they really capable of protecting?
And one of the final items we wanted to provide you with slide is there's many nuances to everything we're talking about of it, but this is a fair checklist of things that if you do nothing else, these are the items that can best protect you for offices. And review privacy and information procedures with your employees. Make sure everybody knows what they are and have periodic refresher courses, even if it's just sending out an email periodically every quarter or every 6 months to remind them about the importance of protecting non-public information. Clear policies for clean desk policies. And when you get up to go to the bathroom, you lock your computer. When you get up your computer, when you leave the office you lock any drawers that might have non-public information. When you leave at the end of the day, you're locking file cabinets. If you have a facility, make it secure. If it's a large facility where there's multiple employees, you can have badges where people need to scan in. If it's a smaller facility, if possible, set up someone at the front who can act. If that's not possible, if it's a smaller office, then just make sure everybody knows who's supposed to be there, so if someone who's not supposed to be there is there, why they are. No ride-alongs. That simply refers to a secure facility where people need to swipe a card to get in. Everybody, you need to make clear you're not being rude at the door, you're just following policy. And that's a big thing because people like to be, some people like to be courteous, you hold the door for the next person coming in. You need to say, look, for getting in the front door, everybody has to go through it. Passwords on your computers and multifunction devices and protecting the passwords. It's no good if you tape the password to the bottom of your keyboard or you tape your password list to underneath your drawer. It needs to be somewhere secure, isn't exposed. And the biggest thing, if anyone, we learned from the Nixon years is it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. If you ever have a security breach, you need the consumers, and usually you can offer to provide them with protection. There are services out there that will essentially protect their. It's a relatively low-cost way to buy good rumors. And if it is a significant enough oversight, and if you're a large enough company, this is something that needs to be publicly notified. But generally, you're going to have someone in your legal department who can answer that question. That's it for what we had. For any questions, they can use the chat function to submit them.
A lot of information to cover in 30 minutes. To reserve some time now to questions the attendees may have, and if you do have a question, please use the chat lower right-hand corner. And as we wait for any of those to pop in, we did receive a for today's presentation, and the question was if either of the presenters had any agency on securing NPI when using email and the you touched on some of that on encryption and passwords. Maybe you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, email has been notoriously, I mean, it's ubiquitous. Everybody has access to it. The problem is it's not secure. Widely known that it's unsecure. So anything that would contain non-public information, you need to, at a minimum, encrypt it and password protect it. And that would work for small agencies. There's lots of solutions, inexpensive ones. Then there are also some very high-end systems as well. But you do have to be very careful with email. One of the examples of that is a few years ago, sending closing documents to agents. They went from email to requiring a notification would come to the agent via email and somewhere else to log in to download the documents for the closing. They were aware of the problem back then, same problem today, of the email settlement statements and other documents that contain non-public information. Encryption is probably the easiest way to get to that. The challenge with that is customers may want you doing that. That requires them to enter a password on every piece of communication they get. So talk to your customers. Best for them.
Interesting aspect that we actually just ran last week, and had to do, and some companies block access to certain websites. Well, we migrated of these title topics webinars to YouTube, and all of a sudden then one of our members said, hey, we used to have great access to download the file. Now since you've moved to YouTube, our employees can't access them. So then we had to go ahead and then modify. I also have the YouTube, then also have the link to download the file. Is what would one way then be able to sites for the web.
Yeah. Yep, that's another thing that your IT people, there are probably websites that you should be blocking, both for security reasons and as a business. There are some websites that it's worth your time and attention to block access to them.
Okay. All right. Another question that came in: how do you policies that are monitor that your policies that you've implemented are being followed?
Well, I think I can jump on that. One of the ways you can do that is you can have periodic audits to make sure that you can let everyone know that they're going to happen, and you can every couple of months literally just walk through whatever locations you have to see, is there any information, is there any PII available, or are there passwords that are easily accessible? Is anyone essentially leaving their areas or leaving the general areas non-public information exposed? And then talk to the individuals who have up with a carrot and stick approach of rewarding the departments or groups that do time. You can have certifications, set up certifications for all of your managers that every month or whatever it might be, that they're certifying, they understand it's their obligation as a manager to have any of their employees follow policies, and that will not only empower them to go after the employees and to talk to them, but understand that they'll be responsible. Managers have one person responsible at the end of the day to do a spot check to where is cleared, and if something is not locked, that is something that that they can do themselves. So it's something that, and it's understandable that takes away from business generation and processing of files. That is taken seriously, and it is something that's going to require a bit of time. The good thing is that once you establish a good practice and that this is something important, it becomes easier over time to just maintain that level with your employees.
Good advice, Michael. And kind of staying on that subject of training earlier on, and frequently should you train?
At the very least, absolute minimum, it probably should be a yearly thing. Probably train employees when they're onboarded, and at the very least on a yearly basis. And if you perform spot checks and there are individuals who don't do well, should get a training refresher. Another simple way to do it is just put up posters wherever in the work people of this importance. If it's out of sight, it'll be out of mind. If it is in saying, here, remember the clean desk policy, remember to protect non-public information, those little items can motivate people and remind people. So at the very least, yearly training, but if you can do it more than that, it can be helpful.
Okay. A little long already, so I think we're going to cut it off there. Contact information is. So if there's anything you would like to follow up, both of them encourage you to reach out or shoot them an email. Today's webinar has been recorded, so in case you listen to a portion of it, or if you'd like your fellow colleagues to listen, the recording will be available. It's alta.org. I apologize. Actually, it's /title topics. That's where the webinar will be found. ALTA has a repository on all of its and that is alta.org/best practices. And you can also find checklists to help you start implementing other portions of the and I think Todd mentioned earlier there's a lot of components to this NPI best practice, and today was really meant to provide information to start getting you in the process of implementing parts of it, not as a rubber stamp. Here's an answer. If there's anything else to add from Todd or Mike?
No, I think that covers it, Jeremy. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you again, everyone, and hope you found today's webinar useful.